So I'm Grant Boykin, Public Affairs Officer with CalSTRS. Christine Briseño's here with me. I'm going to leave in the middle of the meeting, and Diane Stanton, who's sitting in the back, she's going to take my place. She's our External Affairs Director. Did you have any opening comments to make?
No, nope, just that I'm excited to be here. I believe at the end of last fiscal year, Andrew Roth, who is our Benefits and Services Executive Officer, handed the reins over for this meeting, so you're stuck with me on this side of the facilitation for the rest of this fiscal year. So I'm happy to be here and happy to answer questions as we go along.
Okay, and thanks. And we'll sort of be handing off to Diane Stanton. Unless she's got conflicts, then we'll take it as a team approach going forward. So. With that, so our first item is the legislative update. Joycelyn?
Good afternoon, everyone. I believe you have a matrix. Oh, good. It's on goldenrod, too, so it's easy to find in your packets. So I'm going to go through this and give you the updates that I think you'll be most interested in. This time I'm going to skip over the investment-related bills. I think I've talked about all of them in the past. Almost all of them, but if you have questions about anything, feel free to ask me. And so I'm going to start on page 1 with AB 2052, and we've talked about this bill a few times. Was our sponsored bill to require electronic funds transfers for contributions, and this bill is actually signed by the governor. So we're starting to work on internally what that process will look like, and it's been something, it is actually available now. So if your districts are sending paper checks, they can always switch to the electronic funds transfer method, which is, of course, safer from fraud and is greener, and it's actually much more efficient to process. So we see a lot of cost savings from that, which were pointed out in the bill analysis. But as for implementing it entirely, we are working on that internally. The board will actually have to pull the trigger on that. And we're hoping that within the year we can have everything developed. So that also includes the waiver process that was in the bill. So if there's some sort of issue with going to electronic funds transfer, staff at CalSTRS will look at what the other options are and see if there's an ability to grant a waiver. And that is kind of based on CalPERS. They went live, I think, last July with their EFT requirements, and they had a bill or legislation on the books for quite a long time, and we're finally able to do that. So we think that probably a lot of your employers are in a good place to be prepared to do this for CalSTRS as well. And I did have a question that folks wanted me to ask you, and it's whether or not, how many of you, actually not whether or not, but how many of you handle the submission of contributions, kind of the money side of the house? Okay, we see this. Excellent. Thank you so much for raising your hands. And we want to make sure we're talking to the right folks, because we also want to talk to some of the, school business officials, superintendents, folks that may be running that side of the house. So we know we have some of you in the room, so we will definitely keep you updated. And please stay tuned for how that progresses. Questions on that one? That's probably one of the ones I'll talk about the most. Okay, I'm going to skip to page 2. And I want to point out AJR 41, which affects yes, question. Do we have microphones today? Awesome. There's one coming to you momentarily.
Jennifer Miller, Stanislaw. What about the penalties and interest payments? Will that be included in this EFT fund transfer, or will that be done?
The bill only deals with contributions. So it's employer member contributions that you remit to us. Penalties and interest, I believe, are also, you could remit those with EFT, but the bill just deals with contributions.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, more questions.
Is there any mention of changing the timelines or the deadlines to 95%?
So
Does it address that at all?
No. So that bill did not get into that. I know we had a proposal that we had talked about months ago now, and so we hadn't moved forward with that proposal given the feedback we'd received. So was not in a bill and is not in a bill currently.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a good question. Good memory. Okay. AJR 41, I just want to point out, as you know, CalSTRS members do not pay into Social Security. And so this is an issue that always comes up for our members. And this is a resolution, and it's requesting that Congress and the President repeal the government pension offset and the windfall elimination provision. So just an effort by the California legislature to make their opinion known that they'd like these to be repealed. And the board did take a support position on that resolution. And then skipping down, the next few are either not moving or they're investment-related bills. So I'd like to go to the top of page 3 about our housekeeping bill. And that bill actually just this morning moved out of the Assembly Appropriations Committee into the Assembly floor on consent. And we've gone over this a few times, but the analysis is in your packets, and I'd like to draw your attention to the first page of the analysis, which summarizes the last round of amendments. And the first 3 bullets are the ones I want to draw your attention to. And then again, at the top it says SB 1165 PAN, amended June 6th, 2018. So I want to let you know that there were several provisions in the bill dealing with mandated membership for the defined benefit program and then participation in the cash balance benefit program. Those have actually been removed from the bill so that we can continue to work on them with the goal of having a small policy bill next year. So we will still be wanting to do something. So I will definitely be back to explain that to you. And you can ask any questions along the way. You can look back at previous versions of the bill and you can kind of see what we had in mind. But those are out of the bill for now in anticipation of something happening next year. The second bullet point, a couple membership election cleanup provisions remain in the bill, and these are ones I think were important to you with the getting the election forms into CalSTRS. We had a 30-day timeline. It's been switched to 60 days in the bill. And also it's kind of a lingo change, if you will, on asking for the employee's signature as opposed to the member's signature because they may not be a member yet. So we're trying to be precise. There was a retroactive effective date for those provisions. That retroactive effective date has been taken out, and that was due to some concerns raised by the legislature. So those provisions will be effective January 1st, 2019, along with the rest of the bill, and that's generally when legislation takes effect. Let me double check my list. The last 2 are provisions that affect members in retirement, and we've gone over those. I mentioned that they were going into the bill, so this describes what they are briefly. There's other sections later on in the analysis that describe them more in length, and so if you want to look at those, feel free. And then, of course, every time we amend the bill, we catch some minor drafting errors and statutory reference changes, so those have also been updated. Any questions on our housekeeping bill? Great. I also just want to make sure you know that, back to page 3 of the matrix, that SCA 8 and SCA 10 by Senator Morlock, the first one basically says that if the legislature wants to make changes to pension plans, they can do so for service going forward. And that's something, is related to the California rule and the court cases that are still waiting to be heard, if you will. And this would kind of, if those decisions, which there haven't even been arguments made yet, but if those decisions were to say, no, you can change benefits going forward for active members, this is kind of something that would implement that. The author had held off on that, presenting it last year because obviously it was premature, still somewhat premature since the California Supreme Court hasn't said anything yet. But the author, I think, wants to have that bill heard and have its day in a hearing. So it is actually up on, it is August 13th. So next Monday. It's coming up fast. So the board has an opposed position on that, but it will be up in committee. I'm anticipating it won't move out of committee. And then SCA 10 says that if there's any increase in benefits, that the electorate of that entity has to agree to those two-thirds vote. So, and there are questions about what the electorate would be in conjunction with CalSTRS benefits, but so that hasn't been clarified. So again, the author wanted to make sure that it was heard in committee, so it'll also be up this coming Monday. Okay, And then just to draw your attention to a federal bill that we've talked about before, it's on the top of page 4. The number is HR 6290. We also refer to it as PEPTA, the Public Employees Pension Transparency Act. So this has been introduced by Congressman Nunez since 2010. There have been various bill numbers associated with it. And it's asking for us to report a lot of our actuarial information, investment information, using what I believe the congressman believes is a risk-free rate of return. So it adds to the various sets of numbers that we're already required to report when the board did continue their opposed position on this bill, which they've had since they've been introduced, because of the confusion that adds. And what I guess the biggest part of that is that if we're out of compliance, then it could lead to the benefits of issuing bonds with the federal taxes. It could take those away. So that's kind of the tie-in. It also makes mention of the federal government not coming to the aid of public retirement systems if they find themselves in difficulty, which is not something that anyone I know of in the public pension plan realm has actually asked to do. So they've not gone to the federal government for that help. Okay. Questions on those bills? And then I want to update you on potential proposals for 2019. I mentioned the membership cleanup and that we would be probably able to do a small policy bill. Of course, it depends on if we can find an author and whether the board, I guess even before that, whether the board approves us to sponsor that legislation. And executive staff to go through all the hoops. But I also want to remind you that we are still working on the proposal for excess sick leave and the annual billing of excess sick leave instead of having it at the end, billed at the end of a member's career. So we've been doing some fact finding. We've reached out to employers. We're learning a lot about how sick leave, basic and excess, work at your districts. And so that's really, we wanted to do that so that we could make sure we didn't have any unintended consequences if we were able to get a bill off the ground and move forward in the legislature. So I think we've heard a lot of support for the provisions that we would be wanting to put in that legislation, but we definitely just want to make sure we know as much as we can from the experts who deal with this every day, because we don't want to get anything wrong if we can. Avoid that. That would be good. On the housekeeping side of things, it looks like most of the provisions we're considering aren't going to affect employers, essentially. There is one that we had talked about probably last August or November when we met, so quite a while ago, about compensation earnable and remuneration in addition to salary. And this mostly is just clean up in our law to have it read exactly the way we do things and we've always done things. But just so you know, there's the provision I think that might affect you the most, and it's not even really an effect, but right now, compensation earnable is a definition that encompasses many things. And one of those things is the annual pay rate that you report to us for when an employee works full-time. And so we're actually going to split up the compensation earnable definition because, again, there's 3 things covered in that definition. So we're seeking to define a new term, annualized pay rate, which is what you report to us, the full-time pay rate. And compensation earnable would be the what we use for final compensation. And there is a calculation within the definition of compensation earnable, and it's, I don't know if you're familiar with the name, AB 1586. This is the bill that put it into place, but it has to do with calculating compensation earnable for part-time community college faculty. And so that's going to get its own section as well, is our goal. And it's clarifying what components we use to calculate service credit, salary and wages is what we use, and what we use to calculate final compensation. And again, that will be in the definition of compensation earnable, and that includes remuneration in addition to salary, as well as salary. So just wanted to remind you of that piece. And of course, we'll have something in writing as we get closer to knowing whether or not that'll go into a housekeeping bill next year. Questions on that? Okay, that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joycelyn. Next, we have an update on our pension solution, our IT system changeover project. And for that, we have Bill, and are you presenting?
He's come
Okay, got it.
Hello, everybody. It's been a while. I'm going to give you an update on the Pension Solution Project. If you don't know who I am, I'm Bill Frericks. Been working on the project since inception. We have a number of activities that we have planned with you guys coming up. I'm going to go through those. John is actually going to cover the rulemaking process regarding the new file formats, but that's the next slide. He's going to come up when I get there. Thank you. Okay, so just to recap some of the activities we've performed recently, in May and June, we held a series of webinars to go over the new file format fields and values. If you attended those webinars, thank you. We appreciate your participation, and your feedback helps mold the rules and the values. Without you, we're kind of designing in the dark, so we certainly appreciate your collaboration in this. We held 4 in May to cover the contribution file, so that's the replacement of the F496, the VDF, account receivable information. It's largely the same. There have been some changes, obviously, but a lot of the fields and values are similar to what you'd submit to us today. The bigger change is on what we're calling the employment file now, and that's replacing the MRD7, the transactions you do through REAP. You'll notice in there's a lot more information we want to collect around terminations and leaves and enrollment as well. We do plan on doing another series of webinars in September, and that's to go over the progress we've made in design on those 2 file formats. There have been some changes since the webinars in May and June. Not many, just a few minor changes for the most part, and we'll go over those. There's actually a listing of the fields and values in your packets, an updated one, and you may notice some differences from the webinars that we held. And I think for the most part, those changes are for the better, and we'll explain those in September. I don't really want to get into those here, but if you do have some burning questions, I guess we can entertain them. But I'd ask that you save those for the September webinars. We're going to do the same process we did in May and June. We're going to post an announcement on the Secure Employer website. You can sign, or the meeting links will be in the Secure Employer website, as well as the meeting materials will all be there for you to look at and use. So in November, that's when we plan on delivering the File Layout Plus. That's what we're calling it. That will be the detailed information that you need to begin the system changes on your end to accommodate the new fields and values requirements. That will consist of a more detailed file layout, the actual coded values that we're going to ask you to use. It will also include a lot of the rules that we're going to apply to the new file format. So a lot of the valid values are structural rules that say if you have like a service type of X, you can only have a time base of Y and Z. There's a lot of those structural rules that say, based on what values in one field, it's limited in other fields. So the information that you need to make changes on your end will be included in that information we deliver in November. John's going to cover the rulemaking process in just a second. The last item that we're going to start in November is the employer readiness assessments. Now, we did already reach out to all of the county offices and a few direct reports for some preliminary information. We sent an email with a series of questions asking about your payroll systems, how your interactions work with your districts. That really helped us prepare for the activities that we're going to deliver later on in the project. And I'll go into more information on that actually in a few slides. The employer readiness assessments is much more robust than what we sent to you just about a couple weeks ago. We're going to go into much deeper detail on the new file format. This will also cover how we're going to transition all the Secure Employer website users to the new system. So all of your user IDs and passwords, how that's going to work. We'll go into detail on that. There's some procedural changes around reporting and some other things that we just want to make you aware of moving forward. And also a big part of those readiness assessments will be the new file format itself, and to kind of talk through when you're going to kick off the project on your end to start making changes to your system any concerns or issues you have, and really put a plan in place moving forward to support you for eventual implementation. We do plan on deploying what we're calling a soft launch or employer readiness environment, and that will be an environment that you can test new file format files remotely from your office. So there will be like a test site that will be available to you, and that's coming in October of 2019. There'll be a lot more detail about that. We're still working out the planning around that. But the readiness assessments, we'll touch on that as well. We'll kind of talk you through how that testing period is going to work. One favor I have to ask before I turn it over to John. We do have, if you notice on the fields and values, there's a field on the contribution file that says expected pay periods and it's highlighted. There are some outstanding design issues with that one, and we'd like to talk to some employers about those. So those employers that have custom systems, if LA County's in the house, LAUSD, Orange County, Riverside, Fresno, those are the ones that come to mind. Anybody that has a custom system that's not vendor supported, we'd like to speak with you either at the next break or at the end about that field. If you have the time, we would be most appreciative. Okay, I'll remind everybody at the end too. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to John.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Meredith Simkowick, Governmental Relations Manager, and I'm just here to discuss the process for the regulations. So just as in today's world, the F496 is codified by reference to our regulations, the intention is for the new file formats to be the same way. So the way it works right now is we're still in the preliminary activities stage, have been there, as Bill described to you. We're developing our rulemaking materials right now, and in November we will be going to the board, the Teachers Retirement Board, to ask for approval to move forward with the rulemaking process, the official rulemaking process. If we get that approval, within a couple weeks we will be submitting our publication of notice. The publication of notice will also describe, depending on if the board decided that they want to hold their own public hearing, it will describe what that is, or else it will describe how someone could request a public hearing. Upon the publication of rulemaking process, when we go to the board, we'll also be presenting the new file format, so that'll be part of that. And the publication of the rulemaking process will include that and all of the other rulemaking documents. It'll be posted to our website. Also, if you would like notice, you can email us at regulations@calstrs.com, and you will be added to a list, and we will notify you of all rulemaking activities as well. So then there's a 45-day public comment period. So if you have any comments, you would submit them during that period. After that, there would be if there was a public hearing, we would hold the public hearing. If the board decided to hold the public hearing, it would most likely be in February, early February. The meeting straddles January and February. And then, depending on whether or not there are any changes, there may be a 15-day, it might go out for another 15-day comment period, depending on the nature of the changes. And at that time, we would be developing final materials, as you can see as up there. And then the TRB would adopt the regulations, depending on the time frame and comments and changes and all of that, potentially in March or May would be the schedule. And then we'd be submitting to the OAL and filing with the Secretary of State at that time. So does anybody have any questions along those lines? I think the idea here is we would be I know that there's going to be more of a phased rollout, so I believe we would have both regulations in effect at the same time, so you could file according to that 496 or this during a certain time period, and we would be figuring out exactly when to have the effective dates or even inoperable dates where that would no longer be allowed, and that would be depending on how the whole project rolls out schedule-wise. So, any questions? Thank you. Bill, back to you.
Thank you, John. One other thing about the readiness assessments that we're going to hold in November, I just want to let you know that we will be speaking to the payroll vendors during that time period as well and delivering the File AL Plus information. The File AL Plus information will be available for any employer that wants it and any vendor that will be publicly distributed. So we do plan on holding calls with the vendors to make sure they're aware of those changes. And we've been in communication with them already. They know it's coming. Okay, the pre-assessments, I kind of touched on this already, but I just want to give you a recap. So we did send an email out with a questionnaire to collect payroll system information and some of the reporting interactions with your districts. This was really to verify our information for the most part, because the last time we did this was back in 2014, and we were finding a lot of our information was out of date. Also, we had some questions about how some of your districts are handling enrollment type transactions, whether the county's doing it, whether the district's doing it, and just to understand the dynamic within each county on how that's all working. So thank you. Thank you for your responses. Like I said, your partnership and collaboration is key to ensure that the activities and the things that we're doing are going to meet your needs, and the project will be successful. Okay, so just to recap, we're going to hold those webinars in September to go over the new file format one last time. Those new file formats will be finalized in September, so this will be your last opportunity to weigh in on those. Again, there's been some changes since the May and June webinars, but not a whole lot, and we think those changes are for the better, and we'll go over those. We're not going to do separate meetings for the contribution file versus the employment file. We're going to do it all in one, because the scale of changes isn't really necessary to have two series of webinars for those. So in November, again, we're going to do that vendor IT outreach and support. That's the File AL Plus that we'll be delivering. We'll have calls with vendors if you have vendor-supported systems. We'll have calls with your in-house IT staff if you have custom systems, just so we're all on the same page, and we all have a comprehensive plan moving forward towards implementation. The readiness assessments will also kick off in November, and also the rulemaking process. Are there any questions for me about the new file formats or any of the information I covered? Christine, did you want to add anything?
Yes, Bill, I would. So first I would just like to say that I've been thanking you for the last 2 years now for all of your participation that's gotten us to the sheets that you have in your packet that tell you all of those fields and values that we believe will help us pay a more accurate and timely benefit to our members. So this is where we've landed so far. The expected pay period is something that we want to make sure we get absolutely right, because a lot of our rules associated are dependent upon knowing how and when you pay. So we want to make sure that for our custom systems especially, that we are building logic that will work for both your systems and for ours. So thank you for staying behind if you have time to help us talk through some of that. In addition, we will be talking through it as a larger group in September to give everyone an opportunity to see what we actually landed on, and to get that last minute additional feedback on what we are proposing. And then, as John mentioned, there are comment periods that are baked into the rulemaking process all along the way. So we want to make sure that you understand that throughout this entire process, both before we got here and all the way to the end, we want you to work with us and to partner with us so we can make sure at the end we're all successful. Now, we are utilizing the rulemaking process because at the end of the day, when we go live, you will be required to report in this new file format. So we want you to make sure you understand that. And then in September, at the employer forums, of any that are important, those are the most important ones, because that is also when we will share with you the what we're calling a soft launch employer readiness environment process. We'll be sharing with you what the overall plan is, our strategy for implementing it over a 14-month window. We want to we want to make sure you understand that this is the time period where you'll need to kick off your own system projects to get these new fields and values into your systems with the logic associated, so that when you're ready to test a file, we will have an environment for you to test it against. It will be real live data, just not connected to production, and the expectations will be that you're able to successfully process a file in it, and are already in line for our larger go live of actual production, which is in 2021. So lots more data to come. We will need to start to talk to you about your fully implementing the training plan, because in addition to new fields and values, there's new functionality you'll be able to work in and process the new REAP, if you will, a brand new way to get through your edits in the system that we hope will be much more user-friendly. So there's lots and lots in this new system that is outside of the simple file upload reporting. So we're excited to share it with you, and are asking for your continue to hang in there with us and work with us, and we can partner together to make sure that we're successful. Okay? Questions? I knew I'd be worried if there weren't a couple.
Hi, Sean from LA County. One of the things that you've asked us to do with regard to this project, and probably the other employers, is to estimate the cost that it'll take to modify our systems to be in compliance with your new file format specifications. And I'm just curious if you could comment on what you intend to do with that information.
So that question is a part of the rulemaking process. We're required that if we can get the information to include it in the rulemaking package, but I'll look to Joycelyn or John to help you understand what that means.
Hello again. John had to step out for an administrative issue. So as part of the rulemaking package, we're required to put together a Form 399 that will go to the Department of Finance. And so in that, we have to talk about the fiscal impact that we anticipate from any regulations. Does that help clarify?
A follow-up, just another question. Does the rulemaking process, if you run into any issues in the rulemaking process where things get delayed, does that have the potential to delay the project as well?
I would just say that, yes, it does, but we believe that we've baked in enough time, which is why we have the soft launch approach, is to make sure that we have time built in for just such an event. You can add to.
Right. If it depends, and it's on the slide that we had up before. Let's see if we can go back. Wrong way. I wouldn't say it delays the, separate from the project, I don't think that I would say that it delays the rulemaking process. If we do have comments and then we do need to change the regulations, I think the process acknowledges that that could happen. So after the 45-day comment period, and if there's a hearing, it depends on, it mentions substantial changes at the bottom, and we would do a 15-day comment period for that. And then major changes, there might be a 45-day comment period. You have a year within which to complete the regulations process. The changes to regulations go into effect every quarter. So there are specified kind of implementation date or publication dates, if you will. So it just, if we do get more comments and we are able to change midstream, we would do that and then take the time to make sure everybody has a chance to react to that.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thought I saw another hand. No? Okay, so lots more to come. So thank you for your time.
If you do have something later, you can always email us at the email address in your packets and on the screen. Thank you.
You want to go ahead and go?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so next I'm really excited to bring up one of our trainers, our employer trainers, Kay. And this is actually one of the additions that we'd like to add as we move through this fiscal year. We'd love to bring you more topical relative training information related to the hot topics, common errors, and common questions. So Kay has a list of things that she's going to share with us today, and then we'll have an open forum to answer any questions related to the topics that she's shared and any sort of burning questions or issues that you're dealing with that you need to ask, because we, in addition to Kay's expertise, we also have additional employer representatives here to answer your questions. So I'll turn it over to Kay.
Thank you, Christine. For those that don't know me, my name is Kay. I am part of the training team within Employer Services in Member Account Services. So today, I'll be going over 3 topics that relate to employer reporting. But actually, before I go into the presentation, since I have you all here today, I do want to thank everyone, our employers, on behalf of Employer Services for being such collaborative partners, giving us so much support when it comes to employer trainings. So last fiscal year, so 2017-18, we had a tremendous turnout as far as our webinar trainings, our in-person trainings, specifically those that we held at the various member service centers throughout the state, and also conference call trainings as well. So last fiscal year, Employer Services, along with the Member Account Services training team, we were able to complete 57 employer trainings. So 57. This is a mix of our in-person classroom-style trainings, our webinar trainings, as well as conference calls. Within those 57 trainings we've completed, we were able to reach out to 1,018 employers. So those are remarkable numbers. We were able to provide education and outreach for our payroll staff that we work with and those in HR. And then within the 1,018 employers and 57 trainings we've completed, here's the big one. We had participation of 1,500 attendees. So great numbers. The attendees that have participated in our trainings range from anywhere from your payroll analysts at your district or counties or charter schools up to your leadership level as well. So once again, I do want to thank everyone for being supportive, those that helped us market our trainings, those that sent out our email blasts, those that, woke up early, got to your office early to open up the training room for us at 7 a.m., those that asked the IT person to come meet us at 6 a.m. to set up the PowerPoint. So once again, I want to thank everyone on behalf of Employer Services. Okay, so before I do want to say that I have brought a few folks with me today. I didn't have to bring her. She's a staple here, Ms. Nicole Snyder and Megan Harris. They will be helping me today with any questions that you may have regarding our presentation and topics that I'll be presenting. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. So what we'll be covering is limited term payments. This is specifically for CalSTRS 2% at 60 members. How will you be reporting limited term payments that are considered remuneration paid in addition to salary? So I'll go over the assignment code and the contribution code for that as well. Next, reduced workload program, otherwise known as RWP. There have been some updates to the law and our form as of this calendar year. So I do want to kind of give some tips and reminders to everyone about that. And last, saving the best for last, mandatory membership. So we have a new direction we want to communicate to everyone today regarding employees who work in positions that do not mandatorily qualify at the time of hire, and what happens once they meet those mandatory thresholds. Okay, limited term payments. For CalSTRS 2% at 60 members, Credible Compensation Regulations 27401 states that remuneration that's paid in addition to salary has to meet the following criteria. It has to be paid according to something in writing, so a written agreement, a contract, MOU, side letter, things of that sort. In addition, it's paid the payment is not associated with the performance of additional service. Another criteria for meeting remuneration that's paid in addition to salary is it has to be paid to all in the class of employees in the same dollar amount or same percentage being distributed. A quick tip for that one, if the compensation is offered in one manner, so perhaps you want to pay a hiring bonus, the employer offers either compensation, cash, so $20,000, or perhaps they offer for the employee to, instead of taking the cash, they can have this, maybe perhaps a teacher's assistant for the year. Because that compensation is offered in one manner, it is not credible at all. Once those conditions are met, then, I'm sorry, Nicole, did you want to add it? Sorry.
You said one manner.
Oh, two manners. I'm sorry. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. So once those conditions are met, compensation that meets any of these requirements listed on the screen. So some examples, we all are kind of familiar with some of them: master's degree stipends, any type of career service longevity, hiring bonuses, any type of retention bonus, or any type of compensation paid to retain staff because the position's considered difficult to staff or hazardous. Any type of classroom overage stipends, any type of compensation that's paid because the employee has met some sort of achievement benchmark that's set by the employer. And then, of course, the one-time off-salary schedule bonuses that may fall under compensation that's paid based on availability of funds. Sorry, a little tongue-tied. So once those conditions are met and it falls under any of these requirements, it becomes creditable as remuneration paid in addition to salary, or you may know it as special compensation. Now, if that special compensation or remuneration that's paid in addition to salary is paid out in any of the three conditions, that's considered limited term or limited number of times, then it should be reported a specific way, and I'll get to that in the next slide. But what the regulations say for a limited number of times is one of the following. The number of payments is stated. So, for example, if you are a district or a charter school and you have a hiring bonus and it's met all of the requirements per section 27401 of the regulations, and the contract says it's going to be paid one time only after the first month of service, because that's specified in writing the number of times, so it says one time only, that is considered limited term. Another example of what limited term can be is if the payment has a specified end date in writing. So back to that hiring bonus, let's say perhaps the employer has it in their contract that they want to pay out a hiring bonus every month for any new teacher in the first year, and it's going to be paid out through June 30th of 2019. Let's say it's this year, they're starting employment, it's a hiring bonus. Writing says each month you'll get this hiring bonus for X amount of dollars through the end of June 30th, 2019. Because the compensation is specified to end on a specific date in writing, that is considered limited term as well. And last, any type of compensation that is just otherwise not permanent. So temporary compensation. So for going back to that hiring bonus, or maybe perhaps a retention bonus. Let's say the district is having a hard time filling teachers, having a hard time getting teachers into their school. So they've written out a retention bonus of some type, right? So it falls under maybe difficult to staff. And the writing says this compensation will be paid until our school is fully staffed. Because it's not permanent, it's not guaranteed to be an ongoing, on an ongoing basis, it is considered limited term as well. Okay. So how would you report that? So you have your one-time hiring bonus paid after the first month of teaching. It's a CalSTRS 2% of 60 member. You're going to report that with an assignment code 71. Coding it with the assignment code 71 will send it to the Defined Benefit Supplement Program, or otherwise known as DBS. And then it'll be coded with a contribution code 6 for special compensation. So a reminder, this is only for CalSTRS 2% of 60 members that meet the definition where the compensation is remuneration paid in addition to salary, and it falls under any one of the three terms for limited term payments. Okay. So what happens if perhaps you have a CalSTRS 2% at 62 member, so somebody that's hired in under PEPRA? Is that what happens with compensation that falls under remuneration paid in addition to salary, and it is written out as a limited term payment? So what we'll do is we'll look at what the law says for 2% at 62 for credible compensation. So section 22119.3 of the Education Code states that in order for compensation to be reportable for a CalSTRS 2% at 62 member, it must be paid each pay period in which credible service is performed for that position. Other things in the law, paid in cash by an employer, has to be paid to all in the class of employees, and it has to be paid according to something in writing. So publicly available contract, written agreement, memo, side letter, etc. Now, because the law for CalSTRS 2% at 62 says that compensation is only reportable if it's paid each month that service is performed for that position, that eliminates all limit term payments for CalSTRS 2% at 62 members. So section 22119.3 does not allow for limited term payments for remuneration that's paid in addition to salary, so it should not be reported. So that one-time bonus for that PEPRA member paid first month of service is not reportable. Okay. So next, we have updates for Reduced Workload Program, otherwise known as RWP. So what's new? First thing first, some of you may have filled this out already the last few months or so, the Reduced Workload Program Eligibility Certification Form. That has been updated as of January 2018. A reminder for all of our employers, it must be completed and submitted to CalSTRS prior to start of the member's school term. And we want to remind employers to always keep up to date with the various revisions of the forms, especially with the Reduced Workload Program form this year, because we've actually replaced some language on the form. Previously, the form required you to enter in the academic year start date. That has been replaced with the word school term. So school term is now on the RWP form. So what is school term? It's what's required as far as the start date and the end date for that position in which the member is agreeing to have a reduced workload year. So academic year is no longer available on the form. That's been replaced with school term. Must be completed and submitted to us prior to the first day of the member starting the reduced workload year. Okay. Another reminder and kind of just update to reduced workload program, if you have a member who has entered into a reduced workload year, and perhaps sometime during the year they work full-time instead of their agreed upon 50%. Members that year in which they work full-time, that will count towards their 10-year maximum threshold for participation in the RWP program. Prior years, it would have been terminated and things like that, but if a member does work full-time in a reduced workload year, it does count towards the 10-year maximum participation for RWP. Employers are still responsible for paying the RWP contribution rate. You're still going to report it with the 36. So all things apply. Okay. Okay. So saving the best for last, mandatory membership. So I stated earlier in the beginning, we had some new updates as far as direction for mandatory membership. So before we do that, let's kind of go over some so what the law says for mandatory membership for specific employee positions that don't require membership on the first day. So for substitute positions, employees who work in substitute positions, if they perform 100 or more days of credible service, and this is for K-12, the County Office of Education, and the charter school employers, if they perform 100 or more days in a single fiscal year for one employer, that they're required to become a member the first day of the next pay period. For part-time hourly employees who perform at least 60 or more hours in a pay period for the same employer in the same fiscal year, they are required to become members on the first day of the next pay period. And next, for part-time daily, those employees that work on a daily part-time basis, if they perform 10 or more days of credible service in a single pay period for the same employer in one fiscal year, they are required to become members the first day of the next pay period. Okay, and for these three scenarios and positions, they will become a member, as I stated, the first day of the following pay period. And now this is regardless if the next pay period crosses into another fiscal year, or it is regardless if the employee actually returns back to work. So this may be common for substitute teachers where they meet the 100 days of credible service as a substitute teacher in June. So example, we have Ms. Jones. She completed her 100th day of substitute teaching on June 3rd, 2018 for one employer, Elk Grove Unified School District, and she did all of this in one fiscal year. Now, when does she become a member? I think the answer is in the slide already, but let's pretend it's not. Right? So the law says that it's the first day of the following pay period. So she's actually going to become a member on July 1, 2018. She doesn't have to return back to subbing in July. She becomes a member on July 1, 2018. So that is the new direction we are communicating out moving forward, that membership is met the first day of the next pay period, regardless if it falls in another fiscal year or regardless if the member does not return back that following month. So in the case of Ms. Jones, she'll become a member July 1, and if she doesn't have to return July 1 to get the membership date. Okay. Some chatter. Okay, so I'll go ahead and open it up for questions, but I do want to say that if for those that are familiar with our trainings, we do say that if you have a question regarding a specific member or a specific case, we may not be able to answer it right now, but we are available after this event for questions. So have tons of people here. Myself, I have my other trainers on my team in the back. Megan's a mic runner, but she's one of our great analysts as well, and our new analyst Wahida as well. So any of us, if you have questions about specific members or cases, we can talk about that, but I may not be able to answer that for you. Okay? Okay, so I'll go ahead and open it up for questions if there are any. No? Okay. Oh, she's right here, sorry.
Just one clarification on the RWP. It's got to be submitted and approved by CalSTRS prior to the beginning of the school term, or just submitted and given
it has to be submitted. As far as approval, I can have Megan, are you able to answer that, or Nicole, as far as the process for... Oh, Nicole. As far as, so let me get verification on the approval part, but it definitely has to be completed and submitted to CalSTRS prior to the member actually starting the reduced workload year. There may be some time where it needs to be reviewed.
So just to make sure I understand your question, so the slide says that it says the reduced workload eligibility is that it must be submitted and approved by CalSTRS prior to the start of the school term. And so the question is, if you got it in the day before the school term starts and we haven't yet provided the approval, are they still eligible? That's the question.
Yeah.
Okay. So do we know the answer to that question?
Can someone provide us a process-related question, Megan, or no? Or Nicole, I'm sorry.
Nicole always will take it.
Take it. Hi, everybody. So I think we would work with you on that. The law is very specific that it needs to be submitted and approved. But again, we don't want to harm the member in any way, shape, or form. So I would say that we would take that on a case-by-case basis and work directly with you to see what we could do. Does that help?
Right. It's just the other parts of the eligibility would still need to be met for us to be able to work with it. Okay. There's another question up front. Right here, Megan.
Yeah, and then next. Oh,
sorry. Somebody. I could give you mine.
I have a question about the reduced workload. If the employee, who keeps track of how many years the employee has been on reduced workload? Does the district or the CalSTRS sends a notification? Let's say the employee every year is requesting, to be on reduced workload. But then let's say I'm new, I'm coming in. How do I know if I don't see the forms, but it was previously sent to CalSTRS? Then just to check with CalSTRS, or CalSTRS automatically, if I send, I don't know, another form, another request for reduced workload, and then will you be able to tell me, no, the employee is not qualified to go and reduce workload?
So I believe that is part of the eligibility review when we receive the documentation. And then do we have system notifications when they're getting close? I don't think so. Yeah, it would. When in the procedure, somebody chime in if I'm wrong. In the procedure, when we review the documentation, that's one of the eligibility criteria. So we would look at it, and at that point we would reject it back to you and say that they've already exceeded the eligibility period.
And thank you. And I also want to know if the employee is currently on a reduced workload program, and the employee requests again to be. Is it mandatory to send another request, or I don't have to send another form?
So
I have two different answers, so that's why I just want to make sure.
No, that's what this meeting is for, is to try to find some consistency.
Yes,
so we're all listening, right?
I did send it, by the way.
Okay.
I sent the forms regardless, because I wasn't sure if that was,
Yeah. So just to clarify your question, if you have someone that was on reduced workload maybe for 3 years, they completed that, they went off of it, and they wanted to go back on reduced workload?
No,
again?
She's continuing on reduced workload. She hasn't stopped.
Do you have to fill out a form every year?
Do you have to fill out a form every year?
No, you wouldn't have to fill out a form every year. The only time that a member would have to fill out another reduced workload program form is if they've terminated their agreement with the employer previously, or obviously if they're brand new to the program.
I see. Okay, thank you.
That was part of if they go back to full time, that year still counts. If they go back on, that's still part of that 10-year span. That was what she was clarifying.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question from online. Tammy Britt of San Diego County Office of Education is asking, what is the ed code reference for new mandatory membership, or is CalSTRS just reinterpreting?
So there hasn't been any law changes to mandatory membership, Tammy. It's just new direction that we are providing. I don't know if Nicole, did you want to add in on the inner workings behind this? For Tammy?
I'm really sorry. What was the question again?
Okay, so the question was: is this a result of new law changes, or is it just a new direction? So the law hasn't changed. Yes, for membership, the law hasn't changed for mandatory membership. It's just new direction that we're providing beginning this fiscal year. So we're 1 month into the new year. So it's a great time right now for us to communicate that to our employers. So starting this fiscal year, that is the new direction and moving forward, that's what we'll be doing.
I would just add that, Tammy, it's really not new. It's clarification. What we found is that there were different practices happening at many of our employers, and so we wanted to have consistency and clarify the practice. And so that's the direction, is we want to bring clarity for consistency.
And on top of that, we will be, we plan on, I think I've mentioned this before, having a directive go out regarding membership and kind of like a all-encompassing conceptual directive. So we're in the process of getting that approved. So we're hoping to have that come out as quickly as possible. There is an article in the Employer Connect newsletter, which is also in your folders, regarding it as well. So we're trying to get the information out as much as possible before the directive actually hits the streets. But it's exactly what Christine said. And I did want to clarify one thing real quick. The question about RWP and whether or not the form had to be submitted and approved by CalSTRS. The law actually, we just did a quick lookup, does not actually say that it has to be approved. It just has to be submitted and received by the system.
Nice.
So again, I don't think it changes the issue where we would work with you individually to make sure that we could get everything squared away before the person actually starts working and or you report to us.
So that is a great take back for our slides.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Could you just clarify when the slide says limited term payments include longevity?
Longevity. So the remuneration paid in addition to salary, the law does allow for compensation by an employer to pay to a member or employee for having some sort of longevity at that, maybe perhaps in that district. So commonly we may see like a 25-year career bonus. So if they've worked, in the contract says if you worked here as a teacher for 25 years, any teacher that has met this requirement will receive X amount of dollars or percentage of their salary a month. So that amount, so perhaps, let's say it's $100 extra a month. If it meets all the rules and criteria for Section 27401 of the Credible Compensation Regulations, it becomes reportable for a 2% of 60 member as special compensation. So that's just one example. I mean, it may vary with like 20 years or et cetera.
And just to expand a little bit more, so if the contract said a one-time payment, that's what switches it from remuneration. I have a hard time saying that word. In addition to salary as special pay, into a limited term payment. Mm-hmm. Okay, mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Hi, I had a question about the mandatory membership. So it says for the same employer, but then in parentheses, you guys added K through 12, COE, and charter school. Mm-hmm. So when you're referring to same employer, is it based on unit code, or is it based like in regards to a COE, where we're reporting for all these various unit codes? What's the definition of same employer?
Same employer it's based on one district or report unit.
Report unit.
Any other questions?
Just because that was one of the first things that came up and that I learned about as I was transitioning into the role. One of the inconsistencies that we found with mandatory membership is that there was some inconsistency. We're trying to bring consistency. There was some inconsistency with the 100-day rule. So the thought was that if they hit 100 days in June, because it switched to the fiscal year switched at the end of that pay period, that members that they didn't hit the qualification, even though they were to 120 days in that fiscal year, because the clock restarted July 1. And so just to be clear, that even if they hit that in June, they are still mandatorily a member, as Kay said, mm-hmm. as of July 1, even if they're not returning, you still have to enroll them. Because then any other performance of creditable service will be membership service.
Go ahead. I have a question on the limited term payments. What about the coaching stipends? Will those be considered limited term payments?
Let's take it through the rule.
Yeah. So for coaching, like as an outgrowth activity, maybe like a teacher that's doing soccer coaching. So that doesn't, for coaching stipends or outgrowth activities, so compensation for that wouldn't be considered remuneration paid in addition to salary. Remuneration paid in addition to salary it's not for the performance of any additional duties, because outgrowth is actually performing, credible service because it's outgrowth. It's considered a salary, so we report it as, with the lowest pay rate as an outgrowth activity. So that one does not pertain specifically to reporting it as a 71 assignment code 71. Yeah. So yeah, it will be reported as additional assignment. Yes.
So just because I really want these tools to be with you, I know I've heard you about the employer guide. So we are really trying hard to give you these examples so that you can take these back with you, refer back to them as sort of training tools. And so for that one, what I would say is if you took it through each of the bullets, it doesn't meet any of those. So then that's how you know you need to look elsewhere, because it's not any one of those things listed. And I think that is what we were really trying to bring with the credible compensation regulations, is to try to get more specific. And the reason why I'm saying that is because in the new file formats, everything comes back to that project, where if you look at the listings that's provided to you for the new file format, we're trying to get the languaging to be more specific to match the regulatory language, so it becomes more clear.
Do we still have like an updated guidance for what is credible or non-credible compensation?
No, it's a simple answer. It has to meet these specific guidelines, and so in all of the training materials, their training team has done a good job to try to give you these specific examples, but it still is very important for you to be very familiar with the regulatory language, so the actual regulations, and put those things together. And then, as Bill was mentioning, when we bring you the new file specification, so the File Layout Plus is coming, and then when we, at the go live time, you'll get a hybrid. I won't call it this, I won't even compare it to the guide that you guys had in the past. We're never gonna go there. But it'll be much more clear because within the fields and values, it'll have definitions, and then it will have references to training materials. It'll tell you how to code it, and then that's what your single point of contact representative is for, so that you can ask those questions to get more consistent answers. So we're all using the same language. I think she's done.
Yeah. Okay, any more questions or comments? Go ahead, Chris.
Marcos Alfaro from Placer County Office of Education is asking, regarding the mandatory membership, what is the effective date that crossing FY does not matter, July 1, 2018 or July 1, 2019?
Can you repeat that last part? I'm sorry.
Sorry. What is the effective date that crossing FY does not matter, July 1, 2018 or July 1, 2019?
So that's beginning this fiscal year, so starting July 1, 2018.
I think we'll get more specific.
Yeah. Marcos, if that wasn't clear, send in another message, or you can email me directly. So, but yeah, so this is the, like Christine said, we're clarifying the mandatory membership law. So it is beginning this fiscal year. That's the practice that will be.
So I think just a little further, I think that there's probably a specific member question in there,
okay.
and I'm going to guess the opposite question is that if you have an employee that hit the 100 days in June of 2018, are you asking should you have made them a member July 1? The answer is yes. Now we're clarifying the rule. So let us have you please contact your employer services representative so we could get to the specific issue.
Great. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. There's a question in the back. Yeah. Okay.
Was there one back there? No?
Okay. So as you marinate this information and maybe come up with a question, please reach out to our employerhelp@calstrs.com email if you have questions regarding this or just anything related to reporting. Since I do have a little bit more time, I do want to put a plug for our next training at the CalSTRS headquarter building in West Sacramento, across the river. September 14th, we'll be conducting an in-person training for employers. This is geared specifically for maybe a new employer or someone that's new in their role. We'll be providing kind of the topics that are like the basic foundation of employer reporting. We are finding new ways to provide outreach and support and training to our employers. So what we're doing new this year is we're hosting quarterly trainings at our headquarter building. So first one starts off September 14th. Our next one is November 29th, and that's targeting more of the advanced level employers who probably know a lot about credible service and membership already, and we'll just be covering things a little deeper as far as credible compensation, the PERS election, things like that. So just 2 dates. We will be sending out an email shortly to all of our employers with just the information for training for this coming new fiscal year.
Thank you, Kay.
Okay, thank you.
So in addition to those staggering numbers that Kay shared with you, 57 trainings, I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot, but there are 90 direct reports. So we got to the majority of our employers at some point. And then having all of those bodies in rooms and on phones and coordinating all of that is a massive effort. And I think our training team does an amazing job. And that said, our employer services representatives, your single points of contact, we're gathering data because we want to make sure that we're improving when we implement our new system. But just pulling the contacts that they've done this last fiscal year, we're going to be reporting that at our board in September. We actually responded to over 36,000 inquiries from you in this last fiscal year. So, and that's just one way you're all sending emails into us, because today we can't count all of the interactions, which we will be in the future. But so I just want to just put a plug for the amazing service that hopefully you're receiving. And thank you for all of your feedback, both for our project, because we do want to be successful there, but in the topics that we cover at this meeting, the things that we're asking you at the employer forums, and in our annual survey results that we're just digesting now. So thank you for your engagement. That means that hopefully you know that if you ask us, we're going to respond, and if you give us feedback, we're going to make changes in order to provide you what you need. So thank you so much for that. And with that, I will just remind those of you with custom systems, or if you just want to listen in on the conversation about expected pay periods, I'd ask you to stay back. And then I'll open it up right now for just any other general questions you have about reporting, or any processes or issues that you're dealing with that you might have questions about. Is it because you know you can ask us anytime? Sure, absolutely. Come on up, Lita. Lita Hensley is one of our senior managers over just one half of our employer services representatives. So go ahead, Lita.
Sorry. So I just wanted to follow up with you guys. We had sent out a SO announcement regarding the new ES 350 permissive election process. By raise of hand, can you guys tell me whether or not you saw it? All right. Well, then I'm glad I'm bringing it up today. So I just wanted to connect with you guys to make sure that you're all aware. We did post a SO announcement on July 26th. And basically what we're doing, it's in an effort to ensure our members' accounts are established accurately. We recognize the importance of reviewing these forms and verifying the information that is on them. We want to make sure that you guys are enrolling our members timely and accurately, obviously. But with that being said, we are kind of increasing or expanding the scope of review of these forms. And so I want to make sure to communicate to you all that we have created a new process. Oh, excuse me, I'm nervous. We have created a new process called the ES 350 Corrections Required Letter. And so when the districts send their ES 350 permissive election forms through the county, and we receive them, if there are any if there's any missing information, or if it's just incomplete, we plan to send them back through the County Office of Education to gather the accurate information before we process it. We are asking that if you could please respond back to us with the correct information or the completed document within 10 calendar days. And if for some reason we don't receive that response within the 10 calendar days, we have created a letter to our members just to kind of give them a heads up that we are reviewing their account, that we have not been able to process the request, and to kind of touch base with you all to get that information necessary. Because I know sometimes it's hard for you guys to get in touch with the members, get them back in the office to complete the information necessary. Any questions on that? No? That was easier than I thought. Thanks, you guys.
She was bracing for some feedback. Thank you, Lita. It's a really good point. That process, so we get a lot of those forms, and because we start to get reporting, those have been sort of set aside at times, but we have some amazing new resources, and because we are we expect of you more by way of implementing our new membership rules. We feel obligated to make sure that that all the forms that you're sending us are actually being reviewed for error rather than finding it later in the middle of reporting. So we're doing a better job of managing the permissive membership workload and making sure that it's all accurate so that going forward, everyone is receiving the reporting and therefore the service credit and compensation that is due. So thank you, Lita. And once you start getting those, you're gonna be like, what is this? We never got these rejected before, and that's what it's about. Question? Oh, it isn't rejected. Sorry. Yeah. We'll work with you. It just needs correction. Other questions? Okay, so if you have those custom systems, if you could come up, and then we'll regroup. And have a great afternoon.